we live in a culture that
Amen.
hides so much. There's so much that we try to hide. Somebody put in the comments, before you have the conversation on sexuality, I want to see your internet history live, because there's an acknowledgement that so much is hidden. Well, how do we get people to reveal those aspects of it? There's things that you guys that make you really angry. I think I have an idea of what makes Len angry these days. But that allows a certain level of intimacy. So I know more about Len than people who don't care to figure out what makes him angry. And that allows me, one, is if we develop a genuine friendship, to say, hey, I know where I ought to be sensitive, and I know where I need to shake him a little bit and things like that. But we live it, like we talked about the community. I think part of the lack of community is that even in our geographically closest relationships, we hide so much that we don't even have real intimacy when we live with people, because everything is just so hidden.
But I think, part of what the CRC had in its cloistered days of mostly duchies was that they did have a level of community in those 2-week synods. It was a smaller denomination. It was fairly well known, fairly well knit. I remember sitting around tables at my grandparents' house and listening to the adults talk about, oh, so-and-so is going here and so-and-so is going there. All of the CRC gossip. A lot of that is lost, but I don't think it need be lost. And so I'm really excited that Mo is here and Mo is on Voices, and got a number of young CRC ministers on Voices who, are leaning into the denomination.
I had a conversation with a few RCA people. I'm moving in that direction, and I'm not particularly, excited or pleased about it. Rather stay Christian Reformed. But one thing I noticed was, of course, they're classist based, and they had very few synodical level programs for anybody, because that was left up to the classes and the local churches. And then I thought about the fact, look at the institutions at the CRC. And you were talking earlier about folks who are mentally disabled or that sort of thing. Look at the institutions at the CRC background set up for exactly those issues. When an issue came up, the church addressed it and typically established some kind of a caring institution to deal with it. We got Elim over in the Chicago area, had something in Denver area, had something in the East. That was built into our DNA.
Yeah,
and that's really something, and an amazing thing.
Yeah, and some of it was fostered by the fact that so many of us were related biologically to us.
Sure. Yep.
And but even so, I for a long time I wondered why I have so many relatives on my mother's side, but so few relatives on my father's side. And that wasn't answered until the discovery of our Jewish roots, where my great-great-grandfather comes in and has this little enclave of Jews amidst the Dutch, whereas my mother's Frisian roots in Whitensville, I can't go to Pleasant Street and spit and not hit a relative. And so now the CRC's in a different mode. And then the questions are, okay, what do we need to trust one another again? Because those impressive feats of communal sacrifice were leveled, whether it was trust because of biological relations or trust because of confessional alignment. But it was that trust that afforded people to lean in and do a lot of what the CRC did and how it did it.
That is a pretty deep question. I mean, here in Chatham, Ontario, I talked to people who donated sacrificially to the Christian school, knowing full well that they would not be able to afford to send their kids there once it was built.
Yeah.
That is a deep community. That is a deep connection to one another. And I don't know how, I think if somebody were to say, hey, I'm starting a Christian school today, I don't think you'd see that. I think you'd see people, I don't know.
I think that trust factor is a huge aspect of it, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying about being hidden. Is that if I can't see you, if I can't smell you, if I don't know what your shit smells like, I don't know you, and I don't trust you, and I don't trust that you're going to have my back. If you're not willing to show me your ugly sides, and I think that's something that's economical, because you get to a certain socioeconomic level and you smell good all the time. You don't have to sweat as much. You can buy the air conditioning and all that stuff. And so I think if there is a desire to rebuild trust, then you have to humble yourself. You have to show me that you're wrong. Show me what's messed up about you. I think it's easy for a lot of people to point out the things that are wrong with me. It's one of those things that my wife laments all the time. But I tell her, I'm like, I want people to know who they're really working with. I have a bad temper. I cross lines sometimes. But if you know that about me, then you can navigate me, and it's easier for you to trust me. Rather than, we all know there's something wrong with everybody. But if it's so hidden, when is that going to come bite me in the ass?
I think it's also the case, Nate, Christian schools are a very interesting example of this, because we talked earlier about the rigidity and the enforcement in the community of community norms. And Christian schools were a dynamic of that. If you were a Christian Reformed minister and you didn't send your kids to Christian school, you weren't getting that call. You could get Article 17 because the community said, we are about Christian schools. And if you're not with us on Christian schools, you can go to the RCA. And so there's an interesting dynamic between that kind of sometimes legalistic enforcement that some of us remember in our youth and the communitarian trust, because, well, I can invest in this financially because at least I know where the lines are. We are Christian school, and we will have a booster club, or in New Jersey that night, E-Comp and Dawn Treader. We are really going to lean into Christian schools. And if you're not on the Christian school page, you are out. And we switched to a denominational model that said you can be in and not really give, not really sacrifice, not really demonstrate how much this is going to cost you. And so all of these dynamics are part of a whole, and we live amongst these trade-offs.
When I was a minister in the CRC with 4 children, I couldn't afford to send my kids to Christian school. I had to go to the club, the Christian School Society in my local church, say, I can't afford it, and they help pay for it.
Yep.
It was not true of just me because I was a minister. It was true of other people in the congregation. Yeah. That's something people, I don't know to what level it's going on. I know it's going on in our church right now. I know that. But that level of trust and commitment is really fading, perhaps. Yeah.
And even that humbling of saying, I can't do this on my own.
Yeah.
I mean, I have 3 kids and I can barely afford to send them to Christian school, and I'm about to have 2 more.
Oh, man.
At some point, I'm going to have to go to my church and do the thing that minorities do that I hate, ask them for money.
Yeah.
Well, some of the first things we did as a group, the first institutions we set up were a bunch of garbage companies and a mental hospital. But we also set up those Christian schools. And between the Christian schools and people being related to each other, we did have that personal connection. The Christian school did give people those personal connections.
Yep.
I remember a Christian Reformed minister once saying, I went to a ladies group for the local Reformed Church in America classes, and the ladies didn't know each other. But at a Christian Reformed group of the ladies from the local classes, they would know each other because they had kids in the school together. But yeah, as far as not being able to afford, I mean, just look, the cost of education has gone up more than people's incomes. I mean, that's just, it's a labor intensive thing. So that is affecting it. People are being priced out. You don't see as many families with 8 kids going to the Christian school anymore. And that is an issue.
It still does happen. I have served church in Edgerton, Minnesota twice in the last year and a quarter, and they pay 30% of the tuition for every student in that church, plus extra for those who can't afford it even after that. So that culture still exists, but it's primarily a rural setting at this point.
Yeah.
Well, it still exists in Grand Rapids in the churches here.
Okay.